We were so much bigger than these supplements and diet even, that it was really relational, social, economic.
Drinking that night is not going to solve the problem, right? You'll just probably forget that night, and then it's going to come to you again the next weekend. Try to learn how to face it, learn how to solve it.
One thing we find is that when you hear what people say, as opposed to reading the very same thing, they actually seem more alive inside, more mindful. Voice is actually humanizing, whereas text is kind of dehumanizing.
This is The Metro on 1019 WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham. Now, how often do you talk with your children? I mean, the talk of what it means for kids to be respected, seen, and heard. What it means to understand that a situation is safe for them, or maybe it's not. Most parents may not have to have those talks with their kids, but too often kids suffer abuse in various forms and don't know how to speak about it. And parents may not know the signs to look for either. And that's a problem because children face sexual abuse that often goes undocumented and no one is held accountable. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, every 9 minutes a child is sexually assaulted in the United States. April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. And as such, we have invited Linda Little, CEO of Neighborhood Service Organization, to talk about a new campaign NSO is leading that aims to protect children and families. Linda, welcome to the Metro.
Oh, Tia, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. So, just speaking of Neighborhood Service Organization, why did you all decide to get behind hashtag Don't Touch Me? Tell us a little bit about that campaign.
Wow. You mentioned it. I mean, you said this astonishing statistic. Every 9 minutes, a child is sexually abused. And 76% of abusers are family members and people close to them. And only 20% of those reported abusers, as you mentioned, many times it goes unreported, ever see a courtroom. 20% see a courtroom. So we have got to make a difference here. We've got to do something. At NSO, we give a voice to the voiceless. We served vulnerable populations in our community for 70 years. We turned 70 this year. Wow. And so we have constantly evolved to meet the ever-changing needs of the communities that we serve. As you know, Tia, we have an emergency shelter for women in addition to other housing solutions. But in our shelter, we have about 60 women, and 98% of those women are in our shelter because of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is the number one reason that women and children are homeless. And children in environments of abuse are 15 times more likely to suffer abuse themselves. So this is very deeply personal to NSO because of the populations that we are honored to serve and the impact that they have felt from abuse. From a medical perspective, I'm a nurse. Oftentimes the chronic diseases, the substance use disorder, the mental health challenges that people face is deeply rooted in abuse.
Linda, I just want to build on that just a little bit. I don't want to get too far away from, what we're talking about here. But, oftentimes when we think about homelessness, especially in the city of Detroit, I don't know if that's one of the big talking points or one of the things that people think of as an issue in terms of homelessness, especially for women and families. Could you just build on that just a little bit more so we can kind of get the scene and the scenario of what's happening right now?
So homelessness is just the tip of the iceberg. Everything else beneath the surface is what led to that housing crisis. The unresolved issues, the abuse oftentimes that causes the hopelessness, the despair, causes people to seek other sources to self-soothe, to self-medicate, and turn down the noise of the pain and suffering that they experience. And if people turn to systems and supports that are intended to provide that safety net for them and they don't get the help that they need, they start to spiral. And that there's a multitude of reasons why that happens, but ultimately, then you can't sustain housing. On top of that, we have a circumstance in our community where the costs of housing has increased astronomically. So there's working families. There's children who go to school every day and sleep in a car. So we have an issue of a housing crisis that also needs to be addressed. And a lot of those populations that are affected by homelessness have also been affected by abuse.
Wow. So I'm going to quote you actually here from talking about this particular initiative. And you say, quote, "This movement is for individuals like Detroiters Naziah Harris, the 13-year-old who was sexually assaulted, kidnapped, and murdered in 2024, and the 12-year-old child who bravely came forward about inappropriate text messages from her stepfather, a police officer. This is not just a Detroit issue. It is a national epidemic that cannot be left unchecked." So this is what you said. This is quote you. Please talk a little bit about why you use those two particular examples and why they illuminate the current state of childhood sexual assault and abuse in the state of Michigan.
Well, I'll tell you, those two stand out. But if you look nationally, there's cases over and over like the Naziah Harris. And what's really prominent about her story is that her family reached out for help. They made complaints. And we hear that over and over. They tried to contact the system. Even the young lady that was raped repeatedly at Cornerstone Academy by the security guard that was there. The school reached out and reported it, and nothing happened, and this child continued to suffer. Me personally, I have been dealing with the system for the last year and a half because of my daughter's reports of abuse. And if I can't get help, and I continued to see what was happening on the news, story after story, week after week after week, I feel compelled to do something. And I have resources. I have contacts. I have a network. I have credibility in this community. And if I can't get help for my daughter, what is it like for people who don't have access to that? And like I said before, it is NSO's space in this community to give voice to the voiceless. And that is what we're doing here.
And, you know, just taking it a step further and thinking about, we talked a little bit, but just adding on to the idea that, you know, Black bodies in this country have been policed, since the inception of the country. And we think about the autonomy and teaching what autonomy looks like for young Black kids, especially in the city of Detroit. Can we talk about that and teaching kids the autonomy of their own bodies?
Yes. So, and I must say, I hadn't had this conversation with my daughter until she started telling me about what was happening to her. So I encourage people to have the conversation with their children when they're old enough, when they start to go to school. Talk about safe touching, unsafe touching of their bodies, and who is supposed to touch their body and who is not. And what does that look like for somebody to touch? Because children don't know. We as adults have to remember what it's like when you're a child at different developmental stages. They don't know if somebody's doing something to my body that it's wrong. They just know it doesn't feel good. They know it didn't make them happy to have that experience. And we as adults try to, put our mature thinking on this innocent child. And oftentimes that's why they're not heard. They're not listened to, because the adults who are intended to protect them aren't trained themselves on how children respond to the trauma and abuse. So I had a friend who's an educator who told me about these videos that are supported by the American Pediatric Association. And they're cartoons where children in the cartoon are talking to the kids watching the video. And I remember the little girl in the video said, if somebody touches you and you don't like it and it makes you feel a certain kind of way, I'm paraphrasing, These weren't her words. She said, you scream as loud as you can, don't touch me. And you run and you tell an adult that you trust. That is what she said. And that, as I kept hearing these stories of people who have reached out to the system, who tried to get protection for these children, and the system has failed them, that statement from that little girl in that cartoon resonated in my ear so loudly It was, it was as if God had come down from heaven to say, "Do you hear me, daughter? Do you hear me? Don't touch me." And that is why the name of this campaign is so called that.
Don't touch me. And it's something as small as just that child saying that a few times. And you said, you know what? That's all that we need. Mm-hmm. That's all that we need. I'm Tia Graham. You're listening to The Metro on WDET. We're talking about a new campaign, #Don'tTouchMe, through the Neighborhood Service Organization. Our guest is Linda Little, CEO of Neighborhood Service Organization. So just sticking to talking to your kids, excuse me, and the #Don'tTouchMe and what to teach your kids, especially for parents as we flip it around. What are some of the things that parents should start to notice, or if there are changes that as a parent you should be aware of in your child if something does occur or you're starting to see a pattern of things happening?
Yes. So children are innocent. So paying attention to your child, for one thing, watching the signs if their behavior changes, if their sleep patterns change, if they start to have enuresis, bedwetting, if they start withholding urine. My daughter started withholding urine. She just wouldn't go. Any subtle changes that your child may be experiencing, just pay attention. Listen to them. It may take a while for them to process what's happening, so it may not be in real time, but continue to be open to listen to them. And they'll talk and they'll share. And that's just, that safe space will allow them to share. And when they share, believe them. Believe them. That could go. We can go on for a while about the believing them. Oftentimes, kids aren't taken seriously. They're just not. They're not seen as these little people with giant emotions and feelings and thoughts and working, functioning brains. So oftentimes it gets passed off or it gets pushed to the side. So can we just stick there for a second and talk about the importance of believing a child when they actually raise awareness about something happening? So as this situation has come into my life, I've had more and more people come and share their stories. And oftentimes, as parents, when it's difficult to think about what the next step is, if you believe your child, then you have to take action, right? And sometimes those actions are really, really, really hard, like leaving an abusive environment and becoming homeless, like confronting a person that is provided for your family or has the influence to impact your livelihood. There's some really tough decisions that come after that. Believe them. And that's not to be taken lightly. But what I can say as a parent is we have a responsibility to support and nurture these young people that we've been blessed to care for. And they are counting on us. It is our duty to step and stand up for them and to believe them and wrap our love and our support and our everything we've got around them so that they can become viable, healthy citizens of this world and create the future of our society that we want. They are our future. So whatever it takes to dig deeply, to get therapy, to talk to somebody, to get help for you, for how you navigate that situation, do that. But inaction can't be a solution for you. You have to act to protect children.
And before we have about 3 minutes or so I really do want to get into the conversation about justice and what that looks like, especially because you just talked about it. Once you do believe your child, or, you see something happening, it's happening, you believe your child, you take these next steps. What should justice look like? Because right now we know that it's not anywhere near where it should be for children and families.
Well, I'll tell you, I've followed every process that I knew to follow to support my child and to get have her voice be heard. And despite that, in a court hearing, it was a detective who was involved in the case testified that he had a personal connection to the accused abuser and therefore did not investigate the case and proceeded to tell everyone involved that I was coaching her. which is a complete violation of the protocol for the Detroit Police Department. And so nothing has happened to protect my daughter. The system has failed her. And, this has to change. And part of it is there's no required training for law enforcement and people involved in child abuse. That has to change. The detective admitted that he'd never had training about coaching, and there's no evidence. But the evidence that was there, the physical bruises, the medical reports, her statements that corroborates with the physical evidence, he never even looked at it. And so having the systems in place that requires Child Protective Services, whatever that system is, law enforcement, the judiciary, to all work together in an integrated way so that there's oversight and nobody falls through the cracks, and one person can't derail an entire investigation. That we have to put these safeguards in place to protect children.
Linda Little is the president and CEO of Neighborhood Service Organization. #Don'tTouchMe is a global movement demanding accountability and systemic change for survivors of child abuse. For local help, you can make an appointment with NSO by calling 1-888-360-WELL. The National Sexual Assault Hotline is 800-656-HOPE, or you can visit online.rainn.org. That's online.rainn.org. Linda, thank you so much for joining us, and we will have you back.
Thank you, Tia. It was a pleasure to be here.
Coming up, Highland Park is replacing its water system. We'll hear about why and what that means for city residents. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Stay right there on the Metro. We'll be right back.